This episode is sponsored by Squarespace. Whether you need a domain, website, or online store, make your next move with Squarespace. I met Pete a few years back when I was up in Scotland making a video with Gabrielle Matola, which you might have seen here on this channel. And when I was talking to local street photographers up there, so many of them said to me, you should really look up Pete Wands and see the work that he's doing to capture his city of Edinburgh, because it's really worth taking a look. And when I went along and took a look at his Instagram, I could immediately see what they were talking about. There's something to be said for digging deep where you live with your photography work to try and create a cohesive body of work, like Fred Herzog was doing in the 1950s and 60s and 70s in Vancouver, to give us a good picture in history of what it looked like to live in that city at that time. And that's what Pete's doing. He's going out there shooting daily, weekly, to try and create a cohesive body of work that will show future generations what it looked like to live in Edinburgh now. And he's doing all this on top of a busy day job where he works full-time as a doctor and being the father of a young family. So I've known for a while that I wanted to make a video with Pete to highlight the great work he was doing photographically. But when we sat down to do the interview, I also realized that there's another key component to why he does the photography he does, and that is that it protects his mental health. It gives him a valve, a creative outlet that lets the pressure down on the rest of his life when it starts to get frantic and busy. It's something I hear from photographers over and over again when talking to them, that photography is sort of like a meditation to them, or it's a kind of mental decompression. But I really think that the way Pete talks about it in this video is going to land with a lot of you. And as usual with these videos, the bulk of Pete's images are at the end of the video, but that's obviously on purpose because I want you to spend time with his story and hear his why before we get to them. But I'm going to shut up now and let you hear from my friend Pete Wands.
I've been shooting the street photography in Edinburgh for around 6 years now. Edinburgh's a great place to live. You know, it's very compact, so it's very easy to walk around and explore without having to use public transport. You know, the winding old town architecture and the closes, the city centre hills with nice views over the city, all the nice green space that we have, and you're never too far from sort of cafes and pubs if you need to take a pit stop. The Scottish weather, I suppose, is a factor, and it's famously weather that holds you to the couch in front of the TV and makes that seem like the best place to be. But I find that my love of photography actually overcomes that and gets me out into the rain and cold on a regular basis. I find that out in the elements, I can, you know, I'm breathing, I'm using my brain and body, and, you know, I'm engaged in an activity that I love. I think some of the best photo walks I've had have been when the city's shrouded in the haar, which is what we call the sea fog coming in off the North Sea, or when I'm drenched in rain or trudging through the snow. And yeah, I find that these are the times where, you know, good things happen with the camera and I come home feeling really good. You know, it's not one of the big five cities in terms of Paris, London, New York, etc. But, you know, Edinburgh's got its own charm to it, its own uniqueness. And, you know, wandering through the old town and winding in and out of closes and exploring it, there's so many different routes to go through, and it's a great place to live in that respect. And I'm lucky enough to be right in the center of it so that I can take advantage of when there are changing conditions, or I find out there's an event on, I can go and use that as an opportunity to explore further and get creative with the photography in that context. Between job and family, you know, I end up going out to shoot at night quite a lot. I guess that gives the city a different complexion and character, and, you know, if there's rain or fog added to that, you know, all the more in terms of mood and almost like walking through a movie set type of experience. I find that that is, quite inspiring. A lot of people are, avoiding those conditions actively and turning the heating up and seeing what's next on Netflix. But on the nights where I do make it out and return frozen and cold and wet, I'm actually all the happier for it. And I find that I create some of my most interesting photos on these kinds of occasions with the light that people often don't see. There's elements of my photography that are like, you could say, right, Pete has got a busy day job, he's got kids, and when the kids go to bed, he goes out shooting. And he lives in the centre of Edinburgh, so he shoots the centre of Edinburgh. There's part of it that's as simplistic as that, because I can't get up at 4 a.m. and go and climb a hill, and my wife would be absolutely irate that I'm not helping them get ready for school and things. So that is undoubtedly a component of why I shoot and when I shoot. But that's life, and that's the same for everybody to some extent. What opportunities are there. One of the first street photographs I remember being quite pleased with was one I called The Girl in the Window, and it was towards the end of quite a long photo walk that had been otherwise really disappointing. It was the last shot of the day, but I walked past this cafe in Edinburgh that I quite often pass. There was a nice amount of condensation on the window, and I noticed that girl had just sat down, and I'd had this maybe a few months of street photography in the lead up to this, kind of practicing observation and anticipation, but I thought this was worth picking at and seeing what happened. I caught it just as she was wiping the condensation away and looking from the inside out, as I was looking from the outside in, and this little connection. I thought, oh, this is actually something that I might not have captured a few months ago. This is something that I thought was quite beautiful, but also fleeting and difficult to replicate. I thought, this photography thing might actually be coming together okay. And it being the last shot of the day kind of perked me up. And you get these little moments every now and again that just inspire you to keep going and getting out with the camera. One of the things I took from hanging out and wandering the streets with my young children was how they displayed this sort of openness, curiosity, wonder. They were seeing things that I was missing completely and peppering me with questions about it. And, I'm there to teach them, but they undoubtedly teach me as well. And I learn a lot from being their dad, and they really inspire me every day. Often I would be aiming to get to a destination, and get in there much quicker, but they would be enjoying the journey much more in terms of this richness of experience wandering through the city. During the pandemic lockdown, I made a small project out of producing a self-published photography zine, and I named it Eyes of a Child, and I wrote more in it about this sort of mindful deviation from being the targeted, focused, efficient working adult to having a more beginner's mindset and seeing the city through childlike eyes that sort of inspired by the kids. I consult with patients on a regular basis with regards to their mental health and stresses a lot. And I find that an opening question to ask them during the consultation is something along the lines of, what does your average day or week look like? And I find that an honest answer to that often is quite revealing in terms of where things have become unsustainable or unbalanced in their lives. And it gives the basis of a further discussion on what can be changed and what they can move forwards towards improving their mental health. I'm often taken aback at what patients have been able to endure over time, and I find that hearing about and reflecting on other people's trials and tribulations is useful in terms of finding strength within myself. We often find afterwards, when people have recovered and you're having a further discussion with them, that medicine has sometimes had its place, but often it's the changes they've made in readjusting their lifestyle in terms of exercise, diet, sleep, activities that has made a big difference to them. Connecting with other people is often a huge part of it, but it's an activity that gets you somewhere towards this flow state where you're able to switch off the brain and these negative thoughts and lose yourself into something that you're interested in. Has often had a really positive impact on people's mental health. And that's, for me, it's photography, but for others it might be something like reading or painting, writing. There's a long list of menu of things that people choose, and it's often better if it's driven by the patient themselves, because it's come from somewhere internal that they've got that drive to do. Photography is really how I find my flow state and relax into a state of observation and creativity. I find that getting out with the camera, I think my brain just seems to get out of its own way. I'm not burdened with the stress of family life or the working day, and I can just get on with it. When you first start photography, and street photography in particular, the hit rate is really low, and that can lead to some frustrating photo walks where things are just not happening for you. But there's also days where it just flows really nicely and everything appears breezy and easy, and finding that state of flow is really important, and I think is really beneficial to my mental health in particular. I read this book fairly recently called Trying Not to Try by Edward Slingerland, that introduces this concept of wu wei as a Chinese concept, and it means kind of effectiveness while at ease. And I thought that was quite close to what I was feeling when, in terms of a flow state. I was then watching Lord of the Rings with my daughter, and there's this scene where Gandalf is up a tall tower in really perilous situation, but he manages to find this kind of calm, controlled state where he catches a butterfly in his hands, and it's not too tight that it's crushing it, it's not too loose that it's flying away, but he manages to stay calm and cast this spell. And I thought it was quite a nice visual illustration of wu wei, or a state of flow. My chosen activity to do is photography, obviously, and wandering the streets with a camera. But I think this kind of concept will be quite familiar to people, in a variety of activities that they choose for themselves. And finding that state on a regular basis is something that I certainly aim to do for the good of my mental health. I see photography as this project of lifelong learning, really, and I feel the same way about medicine. And I think the combination of the technical knowledge aspects combined with the human aspects of it really appeals to me. And I think that's probably why street photography has developed for me in terms of my love for it over time. I've got quite a busy, intense job that involves speaking to large numbers of people on a weekly basis about their physical and mental health issues. And after that, I return home to the chaos of a family home with young children. And in between that, I feel like I've got to look after myself in terms of my responsibilities and well-being. Doctors are, statistically quite at risk of long-term mental health problems, alcoholism, suicide, over the course of a long, stressful career. So it's something to be mindful of, and photography is certainly one of my main ways of improving my own resilience and well-being. And I want to look after myself over time, for not just for my benefit, but for my family and my patients who, they give me a great deal of meaning and joy in life, and I've got a responsibility towards them as well. So the looking after myself is an important part of that.
Thanks so much to Pete for agreeing to make this video and for giving me the time to come up and interview him. I hope that by hearing his methodology and his philosophy around his photography has really inspired you in how you think about your own photographic journey. And I'm going to leave links to Pete's work down in the description. Go along and check him out. And lastly, thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. If you need a new website or a domain, they're a fantastic option. I've used them myself for over a decade now as my website of choice. One of the things I really need a website to do is to kind of get out of the way, because I'm not a fan of design that really distracts and pulls focus away from the work that I'm posting. And I really like Squarespace's templates. They're put together by professional designers, they're quite minimalist, and they sit in the background, and they really let your work do the talking. And I'm no designer, so I don't know how to put that stuff together, but it really is dummy proof. I can click and drag in text and photos and videos, and it doesn't let you get too out of hand, makes everything clean and neat. So for someone like me with limited time and design skills, Squarespace has been perfect.
Start your free trial today at squarespace.com and go to squarespace.com/Sean Tucker to get 10% off your first purchase.